Imagine being in the midst of a conflict that would decide the fate of Rome. Exhausted troops, enemies in greater numbers, and a leader who, against all odds, orchestrates a brilliant plan to turn defeat into a crushing victory. This was the reality of the Battle of Thapsus, where Julius Caesar faced some of the fiercest enemies of his military career. But how did he manage to win despite being outnumbered? How did his strategy surprise the Optimates and forever change the course of the Roman Republic? Today, you will discover how Caesar's genius and his relentless tactics determined the future of Rome. So, stay until the end, because this story might change the way you view war, politics, and power in the ancient world. But before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our analyses on ancient Rome, filled with curiosities and epic twists. Are you ready to find out how Rome reached this breaking point? Then sit back, because now we're going to understand the context that split the world's most powerful republic into opposing sides. The conflict that divided Rome. The Roman Republic was going through a turbulent phase. From Julius Caesar's triumphs in Gaul to Pompey's death, the civil war fragmented the Eternal City. On one side were the Optimates, aristocrats loyal to the traditional model of government, and on the other, Caesar and his supporters, who clamored for reforms and for a singular power capable of stabilizing the state. The assassination of Pompey in Egypt and Caesar's occupation of strategic positions forced the opposition, led by Metellus Scipio and supported by figures like Cato and Labienus, to take refuge in Africa. The region was under the strong influence of King Juba I, who saw Caesar as a threat to the independence of his kingdom and therefore did not hesitate to offer troops and supplies to the Pompeians. Tension increased day by day. For Caesar, it was essential to defeat these last pockets of resistance and consolidate his prestige. For the Optimates, surrender was not an option. This clash of wills set the stage for a series of decisive confrontations on African soil. Have you ever wondered how these events shaped the destiny of an entire empire? Leave your like now so we can continue bringing you stories as impactful as this one. Now that you understand the reasons that led Rome to a collision course, it's time to embark on Caesar's journey to Africa. Get ready, because not even Caesar himself was prepared for the difficulties he would face there. The journey to Africa. At the end of 47 BC, Caesar left Sicily with approximately 6 legions aboard a fleet that would sail toward the African coast. The plan was to land with full force and take his enemies by surprise. However, fate did not smile upon him immediately. A violent storm struck the squadron in the open sea, dispersing ships and leaving the army vulnerable. When Caesar finally set foot on African soil, he discovered that only part of his troops had managed to reach the same landing point. Instead of the thousands of soldiers planned, he had about 3,000 legionaries and just over 100 cavalrymen. The numerical disadvantage was clear, and the threat of a counterattack by the local defenders was imminent. But Caesar was never one to retreat without first evaluating every possibility. He ordered the establishment of improvised camps, deployed scouts to monitor the surroundings, and demonstrated confidence in front of his troops, emphasizing that discipline and preparation could overcome any obstacle. The legionaries, loyal to their commander, doubled their vigilance in anticipation of an imminent battle. Can you imagine the anxiety in the air? Tired and scattered soldiers needed to regroup while powerful enemies mobilized. Let's see how Caesar outmaneuvered adversity and kept his legions focused and motivated. First, obstacles and survival strategy. In the outskirts of Adrumeto, a city well defended by the Optimates, Caesar attempted negotiations. He knew that time and supplies were scarce. However, the local commanders did not even consider opening any dialogue. In response, Caesar ordered small, probing attacks, testing the defenses and provoking those under siege. He quickly realized that capturing the city would not be possible without a more robust army. Meanwhile, news arrived that the dreaded Numidian cavalry of Juba was on its way. Renowned for its speed and ambush capability, it represented a colossal challenge for the Roman legions. Showing cool-headedness, Caesar decided to keep his troops in constant motion, avoiding being cornered. His few Roman cavalrymen acted as an initial barrier, delaying the enemy advances when necessary. Finally, around December 29th, Caesar and his reduced force reached Ruspina. There, he found a minimally safe place to establish a more structured camp and, above all, to wait for reinforcements that could give him a real chance against the unified troops of Scipio, Labienus, Petreius, and Juba. Did you already know this intriguing detail about the Numidian cavalry? Write in the comments and share your ideas. How do you secure supplies for men and horses in hostile lands dominated by enemies? In the next segment, we'll discover how Caesar planned a bold expedition to feed his legions and prepare for the upcoming clash. The maneuver that saved Caesar. In Ruspina, Caesar reorganized his command. Lacking sufficient supplies to sustain his troops for long, he decided to take the initiative. On January 4th, he set out with half of his forces on a foraging expedition, seeking grain and provisions in the nearby regions. He knew the risks, but he needed to resupply, or else his entire army would be doomed to starvation. It wasn't long before scouts reported large enemy contingents in the vicinity. Metellus Scipio and his allies were alert and saw this moment as an opportunity to isolate Caesar from his camp. However, like a true strategist, Caesar kept his men in a tight formation. Even though they were fewer in number, the discipline of the legion was essential to withstand the enemy's advances. Fin de tea. Situation became critical when the combined forces of Petreius and Labienus nearly encircled Caesar's troops. He then ordered an organized retreat, fighting as he fell back to Ruspina. Although this confrontation wasn't a victory, Caesar managed to save the bulk of his men, preserving the command structure and ensuring that new opportunities would arise. Nearly defeated but still standing, Caesar realized that he needed reinforcements and a change in approach. Would fate, until then so uncertain, begin to smile on him? Let's see next how Caesar finally turned the tide. The Battle of Ruspina and the first setback, the first major engagement around Ruspina, became known as the Battle of Ruspina. There, Caesar's legions found themselves at a significant numerical disadvantage against the Optimates and the Numidian contingents. For a brief moment, defeat seemed inevitable. The enemy cavalry, more numerous and agile, constantly pressured the Roman flanks. However, Caesar demonstrated the trait that most distinguished him as a general: the ability to regroup his forces and remain calm amidst the chaos. He signaled for his troops to form a defensive test formation, limiting the effectiveness of the Numidian cavalry. Thanks to this tactic, the Romans managed to avoid a total collapse. Still, the outcome was bitter. Caesar was forced to hurriedly retreat back to Ruspina, suffering considerable losses. This setback made it clear that he couldn't win through courage alone. He needed more men, more supplies, and above all, more time. And fate began to change soon after, when unexpected good news arrived. Are you enjoying the narrative so far? Leave your like and continue with us to discover how Caesar reversed this tense situation into a historic victory. With morale shaken, but not destroyed, Caesar's army awaited a miracle. And that miracle began to take shape when ships loaded with grain and new legions appeared on the horizon. Caesar's counterattack. While his men were recovering, one of his admirals managed to capture valuable grain shipments from nearby islands, ensuring provisions for the legions. Moreover, the long-awaited legions arriving from Sicily and Italy reinforced Caesar's ranks. Suddenly, he had more forces and a logistical base that could sustain a more aggressive campaign. Sensing the tide turning, Caesar decided to seek out targeted engagements to weaken the enemy's morale. He faced part of the Gallic and Germanic cavalry, serving the Optimates, and with a stroke of luck and skill, caught them off guard, inflicting significant casualties. This small victory boosted the Roman soldiers' morale and proved that Caesar was still the formidable general everyone feared. However, Scipio's allies were not willing to surrender easily. They then called upon King Juba to reinforce them with his main army. Caesar knew that every move needed to be calculated, as the presence of the Numidian monarch could completely tip the balance of the conflict. Nonetheless, buoyed by recent successes, he maintained the offensive. What can you do when the enemy gains dangerous reinforcements and grows ever more confident? Caesar had a trick up his sleeve. Attack the vital supply points of the Optimates. Let's see how that led to the siege of a crucial city. The Siege of Thapso. The city of Thapsus became Caesar's prime target. Located in a strategic position, it served as a maritime and terrestrial support point for the troops of Metellus Scipio and King Juba. If Caesar captured Thapsus, he would cut off a vital part of the enemy's supplies. Determined to tighten the noose, he marched to the region, building fortifications around it and positioning his fleet to block access by sea. Scipio, on the other hand, did not want a direct confrontation immediately. He adopted a cautious stance. He began to set up a camp nearby, protecting himself behind trenches and positioning war elephants at the forefront of his troops to intimidate any Roman advance. Amidst all this, soldiers on both sides suffered from the heat, water scarcity, and the tension of an imminent battle. No one was retreating, yet no one was attacking either. Until a small misstep set everything in motion, a trumpeter in one of Caesar's legions sounded the advance signal. That was the spark that ignited one of the cruelest and most decisive battles of the Roman civil wars. Have you ever wondered what impact these war elephants had on the battlefield? Comment below if you'd like to know more about the secret weapons of antiquity and share this video with your friends. Want to know how the Romans faced these giant creatures and executed their strategies? Get ready for an electrifying twist when we discuss the defeat of the elephants and the final assault. The attack and defeat of the elephants. The war elephants, brought primarily through the alliance with Juba, were the terror of the battlefields. Trained to charge against enemy formations, they could break entire lines if not contained. However, Caesar devised a specific strategy. He assigned the 5th Legion to deal with these animals, equipping them with spears to target sensitive areas and trumpets to startle them. At the moment the trumpet sounded and the armies advanced, Roman archers and slingers fired upon the elephants, creating chaos on the enemy front. Some of the animals, wounded and terrified by the shrill sounds, turned against their own lines, causing a true domino effect. The right flank of the Optimates, which relied on this advantage, fell into panic. Seizing this breach, Caesar ordered a full attack. The legions advanced in a tight formation, and the supporting cavalry rushed along the flanks, disintegrating the enemy's rear guard. The disciplined force of the Romans prevailed, and the elephants, once a formidable weapon, became a more lethal threat to their allies than to their foes. Caesar's momentum took over the battlefield, but this was just the beginning of the end. For the Optimates now witnessed the unfolding of a massacre that would forever mark the course of Rome. The massacre and the fall of the Optimates. With the elephants neutralized and Scipio's formations in disarray, Caesar did not hesitate. He ordered his cavalry to advance against the enemy camp, while the infantry pressed the retreating troops. The confusion was so great that many of the Optimates' soldiers surrendered immediately, but others resisted and were killed in the process. It is estimated that the death toll reached thousands in just a few hours. Caesar, known for his swift clemency towards surrendered enemies, found it difficult this time to contain the fury of his legionaries, who sought revenge for the hardships endured and the traps they had been subjected to. The massacre stained the battlefield of Thapsus with blood, marking one of the darkest moments of the civil wars. Despite this tragic outcome, Caesar's victory was undeniable. The last great bastions of the Pompeian faction were defeated. Now, the fall of the Optimates was virtually sealed. Only the leaders who still attempted to flee or reorganize resistance in other corners of the vast empire remained. If you were impressed by this brutal twist, leave your comment about the impact of these events on Rome's history, and be sure to share this video. It remains to be seen how Caesar dealt with the surrender of some, the exile of others, and the extreme actions of his fiercest opponents. Let's now see how Caesar's path to almost absolute power unfolded. The path to supreme power. Shortly after the Battle of Thapsus, several Pompeian leaders sought to flee. Metellus Scipio, Cato, Labienus, and Petreius were among those who refused to surrender, preferring death over falling into Caesar's hands. Some withdrew to Numidia, attempting to reorganize smaller armies. Others, like Cato, remained in Utica, where they maintained garrisons. The news of defeat was devastating. Cato, true to his republican ideals, chose to commit suicide rather than live under Caesar's rule. Metellus Scipio and Petreius also met tragic ends, either dying in battle or taking their own lives to avoid capture. These extreme acts illustrate how Roman pride and the defense of the republican system outweighed any desire to survive. Victorious, Caesar returned to Rome in mid-46 BC, being hailed as a savior by many and as a tyrant by others. Even so, the civil war would not completely end until the Battle of Munda in Hispania. Still, the Battle of Thapsus was a crucial step in solidifying Caesar's power, which would eventually influence the emergence of the Roman Empire under the rule of his political heirs. And thus, we come to the end of this incredible journey. Through African battlefields and behind the scenes of a boiling Rome, the Battle of Thapsus was not merely a military clash, but also the turning point in Caesar's consolidation as a central figure in the political arena. His victory shook the structures of the old aristocracy and reignited profound debates about the nature of power and the republic. The personal and collective tragedies, such as Cato's death and the execution of prisoners, reveal just how intense the convictions were. To some, Caesar was the liberator, to others a new tyrant. The fact remains that his conquests paved the way for reforms, and later for the emergence of the Principate, with Augustus taking the reins of a colossal empire. If you enjoyed this time travel journey and want more fascinating stories, subscribe to our channel, leave your like and share this video with your friends. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming content on ancient Rome. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next historical adventure.